In class this morning, we talked about what success for a church looks like. And at the end of that text he just read, it says they were strengthened in faith and grew in numbers. Maybe that's two things. Maybe that's a pretty simple look at what success for a church looks like. Some kind of spiritual faith growth, but also numeric growth. But another thing that I think does look like success is having guys like Colin. I should have introduced Colin during the welcome. He was the guy who just did communion. If you've been at Westgate for a long amount of time, you know that he is what I would consider like a son of Westgate. He grew up here, and he's been ministered to. He's been a leader in the youth group. Colin, I don't say anything up here that I don't believe. And I will tell you, this congregation really loves you, and we are really blessed to have you a part. And I was really blessed to get to be your youth minister. I miss those times. So I really appreciate your words. And I think perhaps a way to measure a church's success is to look at what we are launching and who we are sending. Colin's planning on going into some kind of ministry. He's had a lot of really successful internships the past 2 summers. With youth ministry, and so we're excited about what you're doing, Colin, and where you're going. Looking at this text, we can glean a lot of cool information just from these few words that David read. There's more here than you think about missions and the movement of God and the movement of the church. We've already missed some cool stuff in the second missionary journey. We've already skipped over a cool part. There's a right at the very beginning, you see this split between Paul and Barnabas. And it's no longer Paul and Barnabas anymore. It's Paul and Silas. And I'm not really going to talk about that up here. So you have to go and read that stuff yourself. But it's really fascinating. This whole section of Scripture, the second missionary journey, it's an easy and interesting read. So please don't do it right now, but go do it eventually. Go read it this week. Now remember, the second missionary journey, it started because Paul wanted to do some follow-up where he already planted seeds of the gospel. He wanted to go check on these new believers. They didn't want to just tell them about Jesus and then leave them hanging. There needed to be some continued investment, some continued ministry. And it's something that we are tempted to do sometimes, is convert people, count them as one conversion, and feel good about ourselves and then move on. But deep down, if we do that, it might look like we really don't care about them that much. We wanted to kind of have you as a conversion number, but now we're kind of done with you. And so the second missionary journey is acknowledging that conversion, becoming a new believer, knowing about Jesus and being baptized into Christ. That's not the end. That's the beginning. And so just because you're baptized into Christ doesn't mean that we're going to leave you hanging. It means we're going to continue to invest in you. We're going to, sometimes we're like, yay, that person was baptized and saved. Let's move on now. We're done with them. But this is acknowledging that you're not just saved. When you become a Christian, you're not just saved from something. You're saved for something. You have a mission now. You have some way to plug into the kingdom. You have a role to play now. And so we need that continued investment to help people sort that out, amongst other things. Once someone's baptized, they need more guidance. They need encouragement. They need community. They need support. They need love. They need accountability. And so we shouldn't just baptize or convert people and then leave them hanging. It's not the end. It's the beginning. The second missionary journey is saying we view people as not just conversion numbers, but as unique people with unique gifts who need unique care and support. It's so important in missions to see people not just as a stat, not just as a number, and to care for the whole person. And not just their soul, not just their eternity. And I know that's good, and we should care about their soul, and we should care about eternity, but we also need to care about them now. And people need to know that actually becoming a Christian now in your life, it impacts your life now, not just later. It's not just something later when you go to heaven. Have you guys heard the term, the pie in the sky? I remember hearing this in like cartoon characters would use the phrase, oh, when you go to that big pie in the sky. And it's really interesting where it came from. It actually came from a criticism of Christianity. It came from a criticism specifically the Salvation Army. And so it came from a song called The Preacher and the Slave that came out in 1911. You can probably guess I don't like the name. Don't like the name at all. It's a Weird Al style parody. It's a Weird Al style parody of the hymn, The Sweet By and By. You all know The Sweet By and By, right? It's whenever I hear that song, I think of singing that at funerals. It was played at my wife's grandmother's funeral last week. It's when I think of the Mason Church of Christ sitting there and singing. But it's also like on every country singer's gospel album, they have The Sweet By and By in there. You got Johnny Cash sings it, Dolly Parton sings it. Pretty sure there's a whole lot, so you can check it out on Spotify. It'll keep you busy for a while. But anyway, it was a super popular song, even in 1911. And a guy who is a labor activist wrote this song to the melody of The Sweet By and By, and he was criticizing the Salvation Army for only preaching, but not serving, for only caring about souls and not caring about people's lives, for only caring about people's eternity and not caring about them now in this earthly life, not caring about people's immediate needs. So the chorus, this is the chorus. You will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's pretty harsh. That's a harsh criticism. So what he's saying is, this is what I hear the Salvation Army saying. This is what I hear the church saying is, we don't care about you now. You can live on hay, you work hard, and you ain't going to get nothing out of it. But it's okay. Things will be better when you die. That's when it'll get better. We're not worried about you now. We don't want to help you now. And so to say, things will be better when you die, that's a half gospel. I do think there is some gospel in that. There is hope for eternity. There's a hope for something better than this. But we got to say the other half is God has meaning for your life now. The church has meaning for your life now. You're not waiting to enter into the kingdom of God. The inbreaking of the kingdom is happening right now in your life, in this church, in this world. So it's not just about eternity. And so, as I don't like the criticism, but we need to listen to criticism like this. Because it's a song saying, we see, church, that you're preaching, but it doesn't really look like you really care about us. It doesn't look like you care about our well-being at all. And so the church should care about how outsiders view us. We should care about our reputation. And actually, the Salvation Army listened. The Salvation Army is probably now known more for their benevolence and more for caring about people now, maybe than their preaching. And I'll say, and I don't know enough about the Salvation Army to really speak into them a whole lot, but we do need to have balance. We need to care about people's lives. We need to care about people's life now. We need to care about serving. And we also need to care about their salvation and their souls and preaching the gospel. We need to balance those things out. But you can sometimes see different groups emphasizing one over the other. But we need to have this holistic approach that cares about both. I care about your needs now, but I also care about your salvation. I care about your eternal destination. But this text we just read, it gives a little more info about some of the new information being taught on the second missionary journey. So verse 4 says they're going around and telling them about the decisions made by the apostles and the elders at the Jerusalem Council. What's become known as the Jerusalem Council. And that was this gathering of all the leaders in the church in Acts 15. If you're going to read the second missionary journey, which you guys all are, I believe you can do that, you might even start at Acts 15 and look at this Jerusalem Council, because it's really pretty interesting. In short, what they were gathering to do is they were saying, hey, we're letting Gentiles become saved. We're letting Gentiles become part of the church. How do we handle that? What rules do they have to follow? And, do they have to, can they eat shellfish? Can they eat pork? Are we going to make them follow all the, do they have to be circumcised? And really what they decided is, in short, this is James speaking in Acts 15, we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Let's not make it difficult. Let's not put these extra things on them that aren't from God. Let's not force our traditions on them. Let's not force our customs on them. Let's not put these barriers on them that are important to us and maybe not that important to God. Let's not put those on them so that it's hard for them to come to God. We shouldn't make it difficult for them. We need to be willing to adapt our customs and our traditions just a little bit. We don't have to force this on these people. So some important questions we have to ask ourselves when we do missions, when we evangelize, when we do outreaches. Are we asking people to buy into our traditions? Are we converting them to the gospel of Christ, or are we converting them to our traditions? Are we putting something on them rather than the gospel of Christ, or in addition to the gospel of Christ? Are we making it difficult for them to come to God? Are we making it difficult for people to turn to God? Because that's what this council decided is we're not going to do that. We're not going to add on stuff. We can't just expect people to get on our level automatically. And so this means as they traveled on the second missionary journey, part of the message is sharing this. Part of the message is saying, hey, here's what the church leadership decided. That we're going to give Gentiles full inclusion in the kingdom without having to follow all of our rules. And that's gospel. That's beautiful. That's good. But people are going to have a hard time with that. And you'll see that as we look through the second missionary journey. You're going to see people don't like what was decided at the Jerusalem Council. People are going to push back against this. And so in our text, so this Jerusalem Council, it comes into play when we meet Timothy. So they pick up this new recruit, a young guy named Timothy. He's of mixed descendants, half Jewish, half Greek. Jewish mother, Gentile father. And from the text, you can tell the father's probably not a believer at all. But it says Timothy was respected by the believers. Someone taught him. Maybe he had a rabbi, but you know who was influential to him? His mom. His mom was the spiritual guide in the house. His mom was leading the spirituality in those conversations. It was his mom getting him to see the rabbi. So at home, Timothy was discipled by his mom. He was one of those that the mom was the faithful and spiritual mentor in the house. And that's tough. I remember as a youth minister seeing that a lot for whatever reason. Sometimes it's just the mom sometimes the dad wasn't a Christian. Sometimes the dad wasn't there. And it's the mom leading that drive for spirituality in the house. It's the mom getting everybody to church. And I just want to say to any moms out there that if you're in that situation, well done. Good job. Keep it up. Keep fostering that spirituality in your household. And you can look at Timothy and give you some encouragement to know, hey, this can work. Timothy's a success story of someone in a household where the only spiritual leader was the mom. So moms, you're doing a good job. And kind of like Colin was saying, the mission field is right here. The mission field, in a sense, is in your own home when you are fostering spirituality there. And so, mom, and I should also say, dads, there may be some situations where it feels like it's the dad carrying the spirituality in the house. And so if you feel like you're alone like that in your house, one, I'm sorry that it is that way, but two, good job. Keep up the good work. You are doing well, and you can have success there. Timothy is a success story of one parent really carrying the spirituality in the house. Timothy's mom nailed it because you can see he was respected. He was respected by the believers. Moms have a great impact on the faith and spirituality of children. You were doing a great job, moms. But it's also important to note, Paul wanted Timothy on board because of his reputation. Timothy had a good reputation amongst the believers. He was well thought of. And so again, the church should care about reputation. I think sometimes we kind of have this attitude. The church has this attitude of like, well, we're right and we don't care. The world can look at us and they can know that we're right and they know what's up and they should fall in line and I don't care, I'm right. I don't care if you don't like it. We need to listen. We need to care about our reputation. We need to care what other people are saying because it impacts our witness. We need to make sure that we are known for our love. That's important. And to me, that's at least associated with missions, because if the church has a bad image, it makes missions much harder. It makes people much less willing to hear what we have to say and what we have to offer. We're starting at a disadvantage if the church has a bad image and a bad reputation. And so we should listen to the critiques of us. And I'm not saying that they're all right. We can take them with a grain of salt. Sometimes they're not fair. Even stuff in that song I shared with you, some of that's not totally fair. But we need to be humble enough to listen to the criticisms to kind of know, how are we being viewed, and is there a way we can improve our reputation with people so that we can have an easier time on the mission field, so that we can reach these people and connect with them and not become opponents. That's what I'm afraid is happening in our culture, is we're not even viewing the outside world as a mission field. We're viewing them as people we're scared of and opponents. And that's got to change. We've got to change that. So we need to care about our reputation. And because Timothy is of mixed descendants here, he's only half Jewish, really. He's not yet been circumcised, and people know that. People know that because they know who his dad is, they know he's Greek, and they know, according to the Talmud, you couldn't let him be circumcised, but it's also one of those things the dad probably just didn't let him. And again, you'll see on the second missionary journey, you see lots of cool cultural clashes. You see it was a multicultural world, and you see some cool things that they're running into here. And so this relationship of Timothy's parents, it looks like something similar maybe to I think of like a Protestant marrying a Catholic. I have close family members. I have close friends who've been in this situation, and they have a kid born, and they're like, well, do we baptize the kid? Is this kid going to be in the Catholic Church or not? And so in this case, it was like, well, maybe I guess Timothy's dad kind of went out and said, no, we're not getting him circumcised. But also, according to the Talmud, I'm pretty sure you couldn't do that anyway. But basically, you see the situation. Everybody knows he's not circumcised. And according to the Jerusalem Council, Timothy should not have to be circumcised. We're not pushing these customs and these laws on other people. And Paul is super big in Galatians about we're not going to make them be circumcised. Gentiles don't have to do that. But for whatever reason, in this case, Paul has Timothy circumcised. And I know, why would he do that? I'm mad about that. It's legalistic. He shouldn't have to make him do this. This isn't fair. Come on, Paul, why are you doing this? I'm mad at you about this. But I'll tell you what, nobody was more angry at him than Timothy. Why would he do this? But in this case, Paul didn't want to have an uphill battle. Paul wanted to be adaptable. Yeah, Timothy had a right to not be circumcised. He had a right to that. But so much of following Christ, so much about Christianity, so much about missions is about giving up your rights for the cause of the kingdom, giving up your rights to win as many as possible. And so that we can just skip this argument, Paul's just like, look, we want to reach these Jewish people. We want to reach this community. And if you're not circumcised, it's going to be all this hubbub that we don't want to deal with. Let's just do this so that we can really advance the kingdom of God. And Timothy's like, yeah, okay, cool, we'll do that. We don't want, it's one less hiccup to deal with. So here we see kind of the other side of it. When in missions, we may need to give up some of our rights. We may need to give up some of our preferences. We may need to give up some of our traditions in order to reach people. We need to be willing to do that, to win as many as possible. And so, and I guess I should add this, a little bit of side note here. I think the message is important. Be willing to give up your rights to reach people, and this is a good example of it. But also, you could just make the theological argument that in Timothy's case, he really was Jewish, and so he's not a full Gentile. And so, hey, it's not saying Gentiles should be circumcised as well. He's saying, well, you're Jewish, or you just do it. You just follow those customs, and this will be way easier. So it's definitely by no means Paul backtracking on what was decided at the Jerusalem Council. Paul is not saying Gentiles should have to do this. Anyway, I think there's some important things this morning. We see that missions is about care for the whole person. Yes, sharing the gospel and baptizing them is super important, where their eternal destination isn't super important, but we do need to be concerned about the now. The kingdom is here. It's not just in heaven. The kingdom is here and moving, and we need to continue to care about people's holistic needs, and we need to continue to disciple people and continue to invest in them. Second, we see that the reputation of Christians in the church really does matter. We have to change this mindset of like, well, we're just right and I don't care and the rest of the world needs to get on board. We need to care about how we are being viewed and foster a positive image to our community. And that's what a lot of this month is about. That's a lot of what Watts is about. That's a lot of what the Trunk or Treat is about, is fostering this idea that like, hey, the church, we're good, normal people that want to love you and want to care about you and want to know you. So our reputation matters. The reputation of the church as a whole and the reputation of Westgate. And then last, it's not about us and our wants and needs. And sometimes with missions, we kind of get that confused. We need to be willing to give up some of our wants, rights, and preferences to win as many as possible. And I know all of this isn't super easy. It's not super easy to hear. But God has a high calling for us, and he has high standards for us. But that's a good thing. It means he believes in us. And so if you were here this morning and you need encouragement, if you need prayer, if you want to give your life to Christ, we invite you to come now as together we stand and sing.